Hey guys, part 2. So, homeschooling styles. A question I get asked a lot is, how do you homeschool? And there is a million ways to answer that question because there's no one way that is right. So there's lots of different styles of homeschooling, and some of them you are going to be familiar with possibly, and some of them maybe not so much. So schooling at home is pretty much what it says. It is literally taking your public school setting and moving it to a home setting. You walk through your day as if you were in a classroom, and it's pretty much schooling at home, taking those lessons and doing them like you would in a public school. Then there is online public school. So you may have seen ads for this. Sometimes even if you start Googling homeschooling or anything like that, you'll see that they're pushing you towards like K-12, Connections Academy. Those are public online schools. You're assigned a teacher. You have to check in like daily. You can get truancy and things like that you would get if you miss so many days of school in a public school. You are pretty much in a public school, whether it's in your district or not. Like for us here in Minnesota, we have done K-12 and Connections Academy. They were different districts, so we had to withdraw our kids from the district we live in and enroll them in that district. And so you're assigned a teacher. They check in with you. They have lots of things available, and it is free because it is a public school, but it's just online. Then there's a classical based program, and this is pretty much, they focus on grammar, logic, and rhetoric. And so you start the groundwork with the grammar is your groundwork. You learn how to learn. Logic begins in the middle school age, 5th, 6th grade. And then you start the rhetoric when you get to the high school level. And it's very much based on, it's a language-based learning. Unit studies, a lot of people do unit studies, and pretty much it's finding the things that you're interested in and going towards that. So like say your kid is really interested in dinosaurs and you really want to study dinosaurs. You start with dinosaurs, and while you're studying dinosaurs you find something really interested in sea creatures, and so then you do a whole unit study on sea creatures, and you kind of move unit study to unit study, but you're studying things. It can be based on historic events, it can be based on a location, a person, pretty much anything you want. That's another model of educating your kid at home. Home education, homeschooling. Then there's the Montessori. A lot of times you'll see preschools or Montessori-based preschools. It's a multi-age method that uses uninterrupted blocks of time. It uses real-life activities, things like cooking in the kitchen. You don't really dumb it down. You give them the actual tools they would use in the kitchen, and you teach them how to use them. And then it just teaches real life skills, along while learning. The Waldorf method, this is similar to the classic method. Waldorf is divided into 3 stages, based on developmental appropriateness. Music is a big part of that, and they do not, in the Waldorf method, they do not use technology until like your high school years. So it's very much hands-on type learning. Like I said, classical follows that classical method. They're learning how to learn. They add a lot more music in there than just your typical classical education, and so it's another method. Not one that I have used. That is one I've heard about it, have not used it. We've used a little bit of the classical model. We did that for, we were part of like a co-op, and that was more classical based. The Montessori thing, when we learned more about Montessori, we tried to like introduce that more. Like I said, when I did daycare before I did before I was a homeschool mom, and you just kind of learned that was a thing, and some of the things you were already doing. Unit studies we've done from day one, and like I said, we had done not necessarily school at home, but the online public school. So we still set it up our way and did homeschooling, but we were under that school umbrella. The Charlotte Mason is a bigger movement, and I had only been introduced to this. I've probably heard about it, but I didn't really understand it. The Charlotte Mason style of homeschooling uses a lot of literature and living books. So a few years ago, a friend introduced me to a math curriculum that is very much like story based. So you are learning, as you're reading the stories of these children, you are learning how in everyday life you use math, and how you can show them that by learning how to bake a loaf of bread, you're using math. And by doing this, you're using math. And by sorting animals out, you're using math. And so I kind of started dipping my toes in it. It had a lot of the same premise that was in that classical model. They use a lot of literature, and they really encourage not to read dumbed down books. So we had lots of series of books that were kind of like fun reading, but you're not expanding your brain, your vocabulary, and things like that. So it really bases a lot of that on literature and getting good literature into their everyday knowledge. And then as they're learning, it's a lot of not really a lot of worksheets and answering questions, but it's more of the child learns and then retells you what they're learning, so that they're getting in that habit of learning to, or reading to learn, and tell you what they're learning back. A lot of dictation. They use a lot of scripture, and they use scripture to teach like things like grammar and spelling and art, music, and the nature study is a big part of that too. And so, like I said, there's just so many ways when you start delving into that Charlotte Mason style of learning, you realize that kids are natural born learners, and there's so many things. So we're not total Charlotte Mason by any shake of a dice, but it has been a really fun thing to add to our homeschool style, I guess you could call it, because we're actually kind of like 3 to 4 of these. Another one is a relaxed homeschooler, which we totally have fallen into that. At first, I was like very much, we needed to get all these things done. We've become more relaxed. It's just an environment that offers that a little bit of a structure, because we do school, but we're not on a time clock. Like, we don't have these lofty far out goals, because what I've learned through homeschooling is that by setting these very rigid standards, you're not giving your children the freedom to also explore those things that interest them. And so it's always a constant learning thing, but it's very much more, when you're relaxed, you're more child-led learning, because you're exploring those different avenues that they're interested in. Unschooling. So unschooling actually gets a really, really bad rap. Unschooling, a lot of people are like, oh, they unschool. And so they think that they don't do anything. And that is actually very much not true. It involves teaching the children based on their interest rather than on a set curriculum. The parent is really just the facilitator of the child's education. And so it doesn't mean that they're uninvolved, but it takes a lot of effort to dive into all these subjects. And so, contrary to popular belief, unschooling is not as unstructured as one may think. It's just really pulling that structure and that like boom, boom, boom education out of the picture. And again, like I said, you can see a lot of these different methods are melded together in different ways. And then this is a newer one, the Moore formula, which is, I guess, referred to as the grandparents' formula, because it was designed by an older couple, Raymond and Dorothy Moore. And it's their theory is it's better to not start kids on a formal education until after the age of 8. So this is something I feel like I hear a lot more about in other countries, not necessarily in the US. I shouldn't say in other countries, because some countries start education really, really early, but some have found that by not stepping into that very structured style of learning, that kids actually learn better when they get to that around age 8-ish area, that they actually do more, or they do better learning, because they've had all those years to learn how to play, to develop social skills, to develop all of the coping techniques, to sit still and to do what they need to get done throughout the day. So that's just another one. So there is a lot of different methods, and I'm sure there's probably more out there. Those are more like the ones you're going to hear about and find and things like that. But It's not saying one's better than the other. It's really finding your child's learning style, your teaching style, and kind of melding them together. And some people probably are very much like, this is the method we use, but I feel like as you homeschool and as you homeschooled for a longer period of time, it seems like you just you start to adapt things and you learn more. So very interested to find out what style you are, what styles you think you are, and then like I said, as you start picking up things and learning different little bits and pieces here and there, I feel like it does modify and just adjust as you're going through those years of schooling. So if you feel like sharing, by all means, please share what method of homeschooling you are. Like I said, we're a little bit of a few different things. We did like the classical model of learning, more so where you are learning, you do like a 3 to 4 year cycle, and so you put it's that one room, I don't even know how to explain it right, the one room schoolhouse type of learning where you are learning the same thing every 3 to 4 years. So if you're studying American history now, you're going to study it again in 3 years because you're going to get a different grasp, a different understanding as from a kindergarten perspective to a second grade perspective or third grade perspective. And so it goes in cycles. And so that is something we've used over the last how many years, and we've also put in a little bit of that relaxed homeschooling. Like, we don't have to have every one of these boxes checked. Like, if we get this and this and we touch on it, that's good enough. We don't have to have every activity done. And then we really have found a lot of blessing in the Charlotte Mason style, because there is so much, and then that Montessori, there's so much child-led learning that they get to explore, they get to do, and it's just very beautiful when you watch your kids grow in those ways. So if you feel like sharing, please share below. And if you have questions, please feel free to ask. Until next time, take care.